Good afternoon, good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Monday, and great to be back with you. Looks like there's various little glitches going on, but I think we're live and broadcasting. YouTube seems to be going fine. Facebook turned this into a reel that's vertical. I'm not sure why. Let me know if you have any trouble viewing it. Great to be with you. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Nancy, North Carolina. Gail in Kansas City. Yehuda in South Carolina. Belle in Texas. Bella in Florida. Melissa in Great Neck. Shandora in the Bronx. Steven in New Hampshire. Chaim in Florida, Frank in San Pedro, Aoife in Florida, Debbie in New Jersey, and Ilanit in Silver Spring. Welcome, everybody. Today's episode of AT Daily, sponsored by Diana Lazar in memory of Martin H. Lazar. May the neshama have an aliyah. May the soul have a great elevation in the world of souls. In the merit of our learning today, and we all say amen. And Diana, thank you so much for enabling us to share more Torah.
Hey, I'm not able to get on Facebook on my computer, so I'm going to start.
I'm talking.
I can't get on my computer for some reason. It keeps getting an error message. I don't know if other people are either.
I think it's broadcasting. I can see it broadcasting. Okay. Okay. What was I saying? Thank you, Diana, for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. Okay. Hopefully everyone is having not too much problems. It's just a little weird the way this is going. I don't know why it did vertical. Like I said, one of those things. We change nothing and stuff changes on us. But let's get going. It's a double daf today. Okay. We're going to do pages 74 and 75. They're short, and that will set us up to make a siyum on tractate Avoda Zara tomorrow. So siyum tomorrow. Try to remember something you learned in this tractate you can take with you. We picked this up right at the top of page 74a with Mishna number 9 here in the final chapter, chapter 5. We're probably going to do, God willing, 3 Mishnas today. Mishnah 9, these following items are themselves forbidden, and any amount of them renders other items with which they become mixed forbidden. Number 1, wine used for a libation. As we've seen over and over again in this tractate, sages are very, very stringent about wine that belongs to idolaters because they were likely to have poured some out as an offering to their idolatrous gods, their false deities. And so the wine of idolaters prohibited in any amount. And if it gets mixed with our wine, the mixture is prohibited. Objects of idol worship, same reasoning, and hides with a tear opposite the heart, which indicates the idolatrous practice of sacrificing hearts of live animals. Nice crowd those idolaters were. And this law also applies to an ox that has been condemned to be stoned because it killed a person, from which it is prohibited to derive benefit even before its sentence is carried out. And it applies to a heifer whose neck is broken when a person is found killed in an area between 2 cities and the murderer is unknown. We learned that in Deuteronomy 21, verses 1 through 9, which is that this week's parsha? I think it might be. Which is likewise forbidden from the time it is taken down to the river to be killed. In these cases, if the animal becomes mixed in a herd of similar animals, all of the animals in the herd are forbidden. And this law also applies to birds designated for the purification of a mitzora, one who has tsaras, that skin condition, which was a physical expression of a spiritual impediment. and the shorn hair of a Nazir, one who took a vow of Naziris to abstain from the products of the grapevine and to become impure and abstain from becoming impure for the dead for the period of his vow of Naziris. And when it ends, he shaves off all his head, brings offerings, and then wine will become permitted to him again. So the hair that he shaves off his head can't be used for benefit, right? Can't become a wig for someone else. And the firstborn donkey, and meat that was cooked in milk, and the scapegoat of Yom Kippur, and the meat of a non-sacred animal that was slaughtered in the temple courtyard. All of these are forbidden themselves, and any amount of them renders a mixture forbidden. That's the Mishnah, number 9. Now the Gemara. According to what criterion does the Tana who teaches this Mishnah reckon cases? If he reckons based on any item that is counted, i.e. any item that is significant enough to be considered individually, which therefore cannot be nullified in a mixture even in a very large majority of permitted items, let him also teach the case of significant cuts of an unslaughtered animal carcass. And if he reckons based on items from which deriving benefit is prohibited, let him also teach the case of leavened bread on Passover. Rabbi Chiya bar Abba said, and some say it was Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha who said, this Tana has 2 criteria. He reckons based on any item that is both counted and from which deriving benefit is prohibited. And the Gemara challenges, but let the Tana teach the cases of perech nuts, a type of nut that has a brittle shell, and badan pomegranates from badan, as these fruits are considered significant, and when they grow during the first 3 years after the tree was planted, orla, during which time the fruit of that tree is prohibited for consumption, they belong to the category of items that are counted and from which deriving benefit is prohibited. So the Gemara answers that the Mishnah taught that case there in Tractate Orla, where perech nuts and badan pomegranates are listed among the forbidden items that cannot be nullified in a mixture. And it is stated with regard to such items, those items to which the prohibition of Orla applies render the entire mixture forbidden by imparting to it the status of Orla, while those to which the prohibition of diverse kinds planted in a vineyard, like if you planted wheat in a vineyard, it would become prohibited. This applies to render the mixture forbidden by imparting to it the status of diverse kinds planted in a vineyard. Again, a prohibited item that gets mixed up with the permitted item so that there's no way to separate them. Now the mixture is prohibited. The Gemara suggests, but let the Tana teach the case of loaves of a homeowner, each of which is unique and significant with regard to the prohibition against deriving benefit from leavened bread on Passover. No chametz on Passover. So the Gemara explains, whom did you hear say that such loaves are not nullified in a mixture? This is taught by Rabbi Akiva, and he taught it there in Tractate Orla. Rabbi Akiva adds to the list the loaves of a homeowner on Passover. At the end of the Mishnah here, the Tana reiterates the law stated at its beginning, saying all of these are forbidden themselves, and any amount of them renders a mixture forbidden. And the Gemara asks, the purpose of this reiteration is to exclude what? And the Gemara answers, it serves to exclude any item that is counted, but from which deriving benefit is not prohibited, or to exclude items from which deriving benefit is prohibited, but that are not counted. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 9. Moving on to Mishnah 10. In the case of wine used for a libation, right? Wine that was used for an idolatrous libation, absolutely prohibited both for consumption and benefit. And it fell into a wine cistern. So it looks like a small amount of wine that was used for idolatry falling into a very large amount of wine that would have otherwise been permitted. Are we going to say that that huge amount of wine in the cistern is all going to be rendered prohibited? That would be a huge loss to the owner of the cistern. In the case of wine for libation that fell into a wine cistern, it is prohibited to derive benefit from all of the wine in the cistern, even if the volume of wine used for libation was tiny in comparison to the volume of the wine in the cistern. But Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says all of the wine in the cistern may be sold to a Gentile, So you can benefit from it even if you can't consume it. And the money paid for it is permitted except for the value of the wine used for a libation that is included in it. You'd have to make a deduction for that. That's Mishnah 10. Now the Gemara. Rav says the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel in a case where a barrel of wine used for libation became intermingled with barrels of permitted wine, but not when the wine itself became mixed with permitted wine. And Shmuel says, even when the wine itself became mixed with permitted wine, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And likewise, Rabbi Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, even when wine became mixed with wine, like with like, right, which renders, which we have is more stringent, right? That's a more stringent prohibition because it's impossible to separate, right, where the prohibited ends and the permitted begins. Even when wine became mixed with wine, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. It would be permitted for benefit, but not for consumption. And likewise, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says that Rabbi Chanina says, even when wine became mixed with wine, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And likewise, Rav Nachman says that Rabbi Bar Avu says, even when wine became mixed with wine, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Since it was a lenient opinion, they needed to make sure that it was the correct opinion. Rav Nachman says the practical law, the practical halacha is that with regard to wine that was actually used for libation, wine that became mixed with wine renders the entire mixture forbidden. But if a barrel became intermingled with barrels of permitted wine, it is permitted to sell the barrels in the manner described by Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. With regard to nondescript wine of Gentiles, right, wine belonging to Gentiles that we know was not used for libation, which is forbidden due to the suspicion that it was used for libation. Right? We have no reason to believe it was, but since it belongs to idolaters, we have to be careful. Which is forbidden due to the suspicion that it was used for libation. Even if wine became mixed with wine, it is permitted to sell the mixture in the manner described by Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. It's possible, but we don't have reason to suspect that it was used as a libation. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah 10. Now we're on page 74b and opening Mishnah 11. In the case of a stone wine press that a Gentile lined with pitch and then poured wine onto the pitch to neutralize its flavor, one may cleanse it and it is pure, i.e. wine pressed in it is permitted. And if the wine press is fashioned of wood, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rebbe, says one may cleanse it. But the rabbis say one must peel off the pitch completely. And if the wine press is of earthenware, even if one peeled off the pitch, this press is forbidden. So what we're talking about is, did this wine press absorb the wine of idolaters such that now Jews can never use it because the wine of idolaters is so much prohibited to us? Or was it sealed by the pitch in such a way that when you remove the pitch, you removed any trace of the wine? Whereas earthenware, which is quite porous, their wine got into it, we can never get rid of that trace of their wine, and so become prohibited for Jews. That's Mishnah 11. Now the Gemara. Rava says the requirement to cleanse the wine press applies specifically if the Gentile lined it with pitch. But if he only trod on his grapes, right, the kind of wine press where they're barefoot walking on the grapes, in it without lining it with pitch, then this is not required. So the Gemara asks, well, isn't that obvious? We learned in the Mishnah that cleansing the wine press is necessary if the Gentile lined it with pitch. Right? So if he didn't, and it's made of stone, sounds like it will not absorb enough wine to render it prohibited. So the Gemara responds, lest you say that the same is true, that it requires cleansing even if he trod on his grapes in it. And the fact that the Mishnah teaches a case where he lined it with pitch is because the Mishnah is teaching the manner in which the matter typically occurs. Therefore, Rava teaches us that this is not the case. There are those who say that Rava says cleansing the wine press is effective specifically if the Gentile lined it with pitch. But if he trod on his grapes in it as well, cleansing it is not sufficient to purify the wine press. And the Gemara asks, isn't this obvious? We learned in the Mishnah that cleansing the wine press is sufficient if the Gentile lined it with pitch. And the Gemara responds, lest you say that the same is true and that cleansing is sufficient even if he trod on his grapes in it, then the fact that the Mishnah teaches a case where he lined it with pitch is because the Mishnah is teaching the manner in which the matter typically occurs. Therefore, Rava teaches us that cleansing the winepress is sufficient specifically if he lined it with pitch. But if he trod on his grapes in it, cleansing it is not sufficient. This is similar to an incident involving a certain man who came before Rabbi Chia and said to him, give me a man who will purify my winepress that I purchased from a Gentile. Okay, real world. He purchased a winepress from a Gentile, and he wants it to bring it into the Jewish world, so to speak. Can it be purified, right? We know that metal pots and pans, they can be purified when they're brought in from the Gentile world, right? They can be immersed in a mikvah, or they can, or a torch, right? Fire. They can pass through either fire or water, and then they become purified, and they can come into our realm, so to speak. So, can we do that with the wine press? Sounds like depends on what the wine press is made out of. So let's keep reading. Rabbi Chia said to Rav, go with him and see to it that you conduct yourself in such a manner that will not cause people to complain against me in the study hall. So Rav went with him and saw that the wine press was very smooth with pitch. So Rav said, cleansing will certainly be sufficient for this because it does not absorb the wine. While Rav was going and coming, he saw a crack underneath his feet, and he saw that the crack was full of wine. And he then said, cleansing is not sufficient for this. Rather, it requires peeling. We have to remove all the pitch. And this is what my uncle meant when he said to me, see to it that you do not cause people to complain against me in the study hall. And the sages taught with regard to the winepress and its utensils, the ladle and the funnel, which belong to Gentiles. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi permits them by cleansing, and the rabbis deem them forbidden. And Rabbi concedes with regard to earthenware jugs belonging to Gentiles that they are forbidden. And what is the difference between this case and that case? So this jug contains the wine for storage purposes, and that case, involving a ladle and a funnel, involves utensils that do not contain it for storage purposes, but only temporarily. And if the wine press or its utensils are fashioned of wood or stone, one must cleanse them. But if they were lined with pitch, they are forbidden, and cleansing is not sufficient to render them permitted. And the Gemara raised an objection to the last clause of the Baraisa. But didn't we learn in the Mishnah that in the case of a stone wine press that a Gentile lined with pitch, one may cleanse it, and it is pure? And the Gemara answers, the Mishnah is referring to a case where the Gentile did not tread on his grapes in it, whereas the Baraisa is referring to a case where he trod on his grapes in it. You can imagine that that's going to be a different amount of wear and tear on that surface, which could create cracks, right? Which would then have wine in it that we would have to take heavier, stricter, stronger measures to render this permissible for a Jew to use. The master said above, with regard to the winepress and the ladle and the funnel that belong to Gentiles, Rebbe permits them by cleansing, and the rabbis deem them forbidden. So the Gemara asked, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah that if the winepress is of earthenware, even if one peeled off the pitch, this press is forbidden? And Rava said in the last clause of the Mishnah, we arrive at the opinion of the rabbis. And Rava taught, if one has a tank of wine used by Gentiles, he must scald it in order to render it permitted for use. When Rava would dispatch empty kegs to Harpanya, he would turn them over, placing them in their sacks on their openings, and seal the sacks on their brims, so that the Gentile carriers would not be able to use them for wine. And he maintained that with regard to anything that is used to contain wine for storage, even if the wine may be stored in it only temporarily, the sages decreed that it is forbidden for use as though it had contained wine, because who knows how long it's been there, what it contained in the past, how long it was in there, enough to soak through, and therefore if it was used for storage, can't be purified and brought into our realm. Next subject, the Gemara. Very hot in here. Check, check. AC on, I'll bring this a little closer. The Gemara asks, with regard to the cleansing mentioned in the Mishnah, how does one cleanse a wine press or utensils used by a Gentile for wine? And Rav says one cleans it with water. Rabbi Barachana says one cleans it with ashes. The Gemara asks, when Rav says one cleans it with water, does he mean only with water and not with ashes as well? Furthermore, when Rav Bar Chana says one cleans it with ashes, does he mean only with ashes and not with water as well? Rather, their statements must be understood as follows. And now we're on page 75a. Rav says one must cleanse it with water first, and the same must be done with ashes subsequently. And Rav Bar Chana says one must clean with ashes first, and the same must be done with water subsequently. The Gemara comments, and they do not disagree. This statement that it must be cleaned first with ashes and then with water was stated with regard to a damp wine press. And that statement that first it is moistened with water and then cleansed with ashes was stated with regard to a dry wine press. A little bit of an insight, right, into the tools and utensils and the manner of cleaning and operating a wine press in the ancient world. A dispute was stated with regard to this matter. The sages of the school of Rav, say in the name of Rav, that the cleansing process consists of 2 stages for a damp wine press, namely ashes and water, and 3 stages for a damp wine press, namely ashes and water. Namely water, ashes, and then water again. And Shmuel says it consists of 3 stages for a damp wine press, namely ashes, water, and ashes, and 4 stages for a dry wine press, namely water, and ashes. In Surah, they taught the dispute in this preceding manner, but in Pumbedisa, they taught it in the following manner. The sages of the school of Rav said in the name of Rav that the cleansing process consists of 3 stages for a damp wine press, ashes, water, ashes, 4 stages for a dry wine press, water, ashes, and Shmuel says it consists of 4 stages for a damp wine press, ashes, water, and 5 stages for a dry wine press, namely water, ashes, and water. We all fall down. The Gemara comments with regard to the latter version of the dispute, and they do not actually disagree. One sage, Shmuel, counts the last rinsing with water, which is only in order to remove the ashes, and the other sage, Rav, does not count the last rinsing with water, therefore Rav counts 3 and 4 stages, whereas Shmuel counts 4 and 5. New subject. The students of Rabbi Abahu, with regard to a similar, the students asked Rabbi Abahu, with regard to a similar issue, of cleansing a utensil from wine of Gentiles. With regard to those wicker nets, wicker nets that are used to hold the grapes during the treading, which belong to Gentiles, what is the way to cleanse them? These must have been valuable nets, at least to a poor person. He doesn't want to have to get a new net if he can get this, if he can, render this net usable, made of wicker. Now, it was only holding grapes, not wine. Is it going to be possible? Rabbi Abahu said to them, you learn this in a Baraisa. In the case of one whose wine presses or olive presses were impure, and he wished to prepare his grapes and olives in a state of purity, he must first cleanse the presses from the impure produce for which they were used. And he must rinse the planks used as a frame in the wine press, and the troughs and the twigs used as brooms in the wine press. And he must cleanse the pressing baskets with ashes and water, if they were made of palm leaves, which might be the wicker, or of bitzbutz. Bitzbutz. And what is bitzbutz? Hemp. Who knew? Hemp. Or of hemp, and leave them dormant 12 months if they were made of bulrush or reeds, because these absorb more of the wine. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says he may leave them dormant from one wine pressing season to the next wine pressing season, or from one olive pressing season to the next olive pressing season. I will mention very quickly, because we're not far from the end, that hemp is an incredible plant. Many people know that this is, basically the same species of plant as marijuana, right? Where the flower at the top of the plant has a psychoactive component that people can smoke. But really, that's a plant that is bred for that purpose. So just like dogs, you can breed, dogs over generations to become a little Chihuahua or a Great Dane, right? Serve very different functions in the world. you can breed this plant to become a psychoactive substance or to become the longest, strongest fiber in nature. And I want to give credit to a friend of mine from long ago who wrote a book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes. His name was Jack Herer, very interesting guy. He was a military policeman when he served in the U.S. Army. Later came to California, became part of the California scene. While a lot of people were smoking dope and doing other things, he was very he was a Jewish guy, and he was very curious about the additional properties of marijuana. And he did this research, and it's an absolutely fascinating story. The only reason I mention it now is because I learned from Jack. It's truly incredible that there is a plant, right, that can make people high or comfortable. It used to be a very important medicine in the American pharmacopoeia. Like doctors prescribed cannabis extract for all kinds of maladies, and that's the way it's been used since time immemorial, right? It was just a commonly used medicine to relieve people from certain kinds of pains and stresses, whatnot. But also, it's food, hemp seed, which you can buy now, hemp seed cereal, hemp seed bread, it's a wonderful protein. And it's this long, strong fiber that you can make clothing out of, and you can make rope. That's what it's known for, right? Hemp rope. And canvas. So in the age of exploration and the days of the British Navy, right, when the world was ruled by wooden sailing ships, so basically everything on that ship that wasn't made out of wood or iron was made out of marijuana. It was made out of cannabis. That included the hemp ropes that everything was rigged with. And the sails, the canvas sails, were woven from hemp thread. The word canvas is cannabis, I believe comes from the Dutch. I mean, isn't this fascinating? And that plant is a weed, which means it doesn't take fertilizer out of this. It doesn't take nutrient out of the soil. It replenishes the soil. Isn't that from God? A plant that feeds you, feeds your mind, can make clothing out of it. You can make structures out of it. You can make rope out of it. That's crazy that a plant can do that many things. And here it is coming up in the Talmud. I find that interesting. The Gemara interjects, isn't this opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel the same as that of the first Tana? As 12 months pass from one wine pressing season to the next, right? So if you're worried that there's certain things like these reed baskets that hold the grapes, well, they're not going to be used for 12 months. So if that's what you need to render them, that you could bring them out of the Gentiles realm and into our realm, well, don't they only get used once a year anyway? And the Gemara responds, the difference between them is with regard to early ripening grapes and late ripening grapes. So there'll be a less than a year period. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel does not require precise measure of 12 months, as the lapse between ripening seasons may be greater or less. And the Baraisa continues, Rabbi Yosei says, one who wishes to purify the wine press or olive press immediately without waiting a year can purge them by pouring boiling water over them or scald them in water used for cooking olives. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, in the name of Rabbi Yosei, he can place them under a pipe whose water flows constantly or in a spring with rapid waters. And for how long should he leave them there? He should leave them there for an interval of time, as the Gemara will explain. And the Baraisa adds, in the same way that the sages started these cleansing instructions with regard to a wine press used for libation wine, right? Wine that was actually used for a idolatrous libation by the Gentile. So they stated these instructions with regard to matters of purity. So interesting, we're borrowing from one area of the law to another. Avoda Zara, tremendous stringency. We had to distance ourselves from idolatry with great stringency. Matters of purity, here we're talking about tuma and tahara. And so, for example, right, the food that you set aside as teruma, consecrated, that it can be given as the first tithe to the Kohanim, the priests, it has to be delivered to them in a state of tahara, ritual purity. And the priest must himself be in a state of ritual purity before he can consume it, right? So matters of purity like that. And there's going to be great stringencies about that. If teruma, well, that's a different thing. That's just consecration. But let's keep reading. Okay, so the Gemara asks with regard to this last clause, isn't it the opposite? We are dealing in this Baraisa with matters of purity, not with the matter of wine used for libation. So rather, the Baraisa should be amended and go like this. In the same way that the sages stated with regard to matters of purity, so they stated with regard to libation wine. So the Gemara asks, how long is an interval of time? And Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says it is either an entire day or an entire night. And Rabbi Chana Sha'ina, and some say Rabbi Chana bar Sha'ina, says that Rabbi bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says it is half a day and half a night. Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak says, and they do not disagree, this statement that it is either a day or a night is referring to the season of Nisan or Tishrei, fall or spring, when the day and the night are of equal length. And that statement that it is half a day and half a night is referring to the season of Tammuz or Tevis, the summer or the winter, when they are not equal, and so 12 hours are measured by half the day and half the night. New subject. Rav Yehuda says in order to cleanse those Gentiles straining bags, again, other kinds of utensils used in the winemaking process, which are used for straining the yeast from the wine, right? The wine has to ferment. Now then you remove the yeast. So with regard to those straining bags that are made of hair, which is not absorbent, one may rinse them. With regard to those made of wool, one must cleanse them with ashes and water. With regard to those made of flax, which is more absorbent, one must leave them dormant, presumably for the year. And if there are knots, one must undo them in order to cleanse those Gentiles' baskets and strainers. With regard to those that are plaited from palm strips, one may rinse them. Now we're on page 75b. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. Rav Yehuda says in order to cleanse those Gentiles' straining bags, wait, I just said that. Yeah, rinse them. Okay, page 75b. With regard to those that are plaited, braided, right? Plaited, P-L-A-I-T-E-D, like plates of hair. With regard to those that are plaited from tzafta, one must cleanse them with ashes and water. With regard to those that are plaited from flax, one must leave them dormant. And if they have knots, one must undo them. New subject. Final discussion in this Mishnah number 12. The Gemara raises another aspect of the purity of a wine press. It was stated, in the case of one who is unreliable with regard to ritual impurity, an am haaretz, right, an ignorant person, who reached his hand into the wine press and touched grape clusters that were lying in the wine, Rebbe and Rabbi Chia disagree. One says that the cluster that he touched and all its surroundings are rendered impure because he might have touched something impure and didn't even realize it. But the rest of the entire wine press remains pure, and the other one says that the rest of the entire wine press is also rendered impure as the entire wine press is considered connected due to the wine in it. And the Gemara asks, and according to the one who says that the cluster and all its surroundings are impure, but the rest of the entire wine press remains pure, in what way is this case different from that which we learned in a Mishnah, Tractate Teharos 9.8, the carcass of a creeping animal that was found in an oil press, so that's a sheretz, right? A creeping animal that died and fell in, for example, to a earthenware oven will render that oven impure and can never be purified, just needs to be smashed. Okay, well, what about this? The carcass of a creeping animal that was found in an oil press transmits impurity to the place that it touched alone. But if there was liquid flowing in the mill, it is all rendered impure. So why is it not the law in the case of the wine press as well, that the entire wine press is impure due to the liquid in it? And the Gemara answers there, in the case of the oil press, there is nothing that interrupts the flow of the liquid. And therefore, the liquid connects everything to render it impure. But here, the clusters of grapes interrupt the flow of the wine, and so there is no uninterrupted connection between all the wine in the wine press. Yeah, but the grapes in clusters, it sounds pretty porous to me, but who knows, maybe they're already smushed together, I'm not sure. And the sages taught Rabbi Yirmiyah, and some say they taught the son of Rabbi Yirmiyah, in accordance with the statement of the one who says, the cluster and all its surroundings are impure, but the entire wine press remains pure. That is a leniency, that it's so good that they found that, because otherwise, some poor vintner, who's struggling to get by might have lost his entire inventory. If something fell in, this leniency would help him out quite a bit. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 11. With God's help, tomorrow, Tuesday, we'll open the final Mishnah, Mishnah number 12. And with that, we'll conclude the chapter and the tractate. So God willing, we'll make a siyum tomorrow with page 76, the final page here in tractate Avoda Zara. Okay, I think Nina was having problems with her computer getting on, so I will scan for comments. I am not seeing any. I'm going to reload because everything is acting a little bit quirky today. All comments. Let's see. View more comments. Okay. Acting very funny today. I apologize for that. No, but it seems like everyone's just checking in and saying hello. And over there on the YouTube side, same thing. Where the shofar blows in the morning, says Debbie Barnegat. Yeah, I blow the shofar at our shul in the mornings. I'm not the Baal Tekiah, the shofar blower, by Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But at daily services, I'm the shofar blower. Let's give a blast. Haven't used this one in over a year. Talk about lying dormant. It's a small one. Small shofars are notoriously difficult. So please God, I can get a good sound out for the benefit of our class. Okay, hold on. May we hear the shofars call and make an honest cheshbon, an honest accounting of our deeds over the past year. Let's start with the positive deeds, what we did well, what we did right, what we want to do more of in the coming year. And in that context, examine what we did wrong, what needs to change, and make an organized plan to change it. That's what I've got for us today. God willing, see you tomorrow, Tuesday, regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. And God willing, we'll make a siyum, so bring something to make a l'chaim. All the best.